On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody. I'm here with Chris Frosch of the Baltimore Orioles organization. Chris, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Minor league strength coach with the Orioles. Just finished up my 5th season in baseball. Was in high A the past 2 years, Aberdeen for the O's, and we'll be headed to Double A next year. So excited about that and excited to be on here with you today.
First and foremost, congrats on the promotion. Eastern League is a lot of fun, a lot of travel. What was your journey into baseball, either prior to the Orioles? Have you been with another organization? And then even before that, kind of what led you down this path?
Yeah, so my journey, I guess, into professional baseball started just, with the love for the game. Growing up, baseball was always a big part of my life, and was able to play through school and through college, and then graduated from University of Tampa with a human performance degree. And I wasn't really too sure, honestly, what I was going to do with that immediately after. So I actually started out, taught PE for a couple of years after college, and was a baseball coach. I knew I wanted to stay around the game, and it was over that time where I kind of learned more about S&C and like how to get into the field, and decided that was what I was going to do. So being a PE teacher with schools, you have the summer off. So it kind of worked out nice for me. I was up in Tallahassee at the time, and Florida State's right there. So luckily I was able to get a summer internship there. That was my first stop there in 2019, and kind of intro into S&C world. And then from there, knew I needed more experience and wanted to get into baseball. So I reached out to Zach Dakant and TCU and applied to intern there in the fall of 2019. And looking back, that was probably like the best decision for me in my career. Helped me get my foot in the door and get me into baseball. And after that internship, I caught on with the Cubs in 2020 and was a minor league strength coach for them for a couple of years, and then came over to the O's in 2022. Been with them since.
Okay. Did you play at Tampa, or were you a junior college guy?
Yeah, I played. I started out in junior college, Pasco Hernando, a little north of Tampa, where I'm from, and then was able to transfer to Tampa and be a part of that program as well. So that was really cool. Growing up in the Tampa area, I went to a lot of their games and kind of always respected that program. And yeah, it was a nice college experience.
Yeah, they have a super elite program. I weirdly have always followed them. Probably not the only one in that boat. Like, I feel like their program is really well known across the country.
Definitely, yeah. It's a lot of great baseball in that area too. I think growing up in Tampa, just being around the game so much, also kind of led me down this path. So see a lot of connections in the game for sure.
Do you feel like when you're around the guys, you're like, I could have probably done this as a career, or you're like, yeah, these guys are way better than I ever was, and there's a reason I'm a strength coach?
Absolutely, the second one. Yeah, you see like things every day where I'm just like, wow, it's what was I thinking? But I mean, that was again like my path, and that kind of from that experience is where I kind of got into training and wanting to improve myself. So maybe if I had it as good as they did, or was that gifted, I never would have got so into strength and conditioning, but for sure.
Yeah, totally fair. And then the other point, so you were with Zach, 2019, you said. I was with Zach way back, like 2014, I think, summer of 14. And even back then, I knew that if I wanted to get into baseball, I had to go be around this guy. And really, he kind of just had his blog and a little bit of stuff out. And I was like, I have to go there. And I went, and he is like by far the smartest coach I've ever been around, like elite. intelligence, people skills, ability to navigate a weight room, like get the most out of guys. And this was back in 2014 when I was with him. So I can only imagine how he is now. Were you using some of the tech there that kind of helped you into pro baseball, or like what were some of the big lessons you took when you were there to the professional ranks?
Yeah, it was amazing experience. Like forever grateful to Zach Dakin and the whole staff there. Really, like I got lucky there. I was aware of who he was and the field and all that, but couldn't imagine the experience would have gone the way it did and how great it was. I mean, we were kind of thrown into the fire and trusted to work with top level college athletes. So at that time I didn't have a ton of experience, but was able to work hands on right by his side and exposed to a ton of technology. That was force plates. Got to play with those for the first time, like motion capture lab stuff that was way over my head. But to be side by side, some of the best in the field and kind of have them show you the way was invaluable experience looking back.
Yeah, like I said, he was really good when I was there, and I can only imagine how much better it is now that he has more objective data, because we didn't really use any of that stuff, and still just watching him work on a daily basis and being around him, being around the football staff there. And they were in the College World Series when we got there. So he wasn't even really around at the beginning because he was traveling with the team and everything. So we spent a lot of time with the football staff as well. And just, yeah, I would agree. Super, super valuable experience. I was in grad school at the time, but I still didn't really know what I was doing. Not that I do now, but back then I definitely didn't know what I was doing. And I was just like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. So I can relate with your story and your time there. And it's definitely somewhere to be that you kind of come out on the other side of it much better. And then, heading into pro ball now, you said you just finished your 5th year. So what is your best professional baseball story that you have thus far? Either something that makes you laugh, something you're proud of, something you smile on, just what's your most fond memory thus far?
Yeah, definitely pick up some stories in the game. I would say the best thing to me would be this past year's team in Aberdeen in 2024 led all of minor league baseball in stolen bases and actually broke the single season record by a team. So we finished with 363 stolen bases on the year, and came down to the last game of the season on the Sunday, and needed one to break it, and ended up with 3. So a game of inches, and it came down to that last day. So I know that's something that everybody a part of that group, was really proud of, and a very special accomplishment. So.
Is that a collective group, or is there a couple guys that were real burners and then you just kind of sprinkle in the remainder with the rest of the team?
A little bit of both. I mean, for sure, we had some guys leading the charge, but very much so a collective group as well. Like all those guys could run. They all played the game hard, took pride in that, I think. And I think it was one of those, iron sharpening iron. They kind of pushed each other, and everybody wanted to be that guy to get that record. But they were all part of it, and it's something that I know everybody in the org and all the coaches were very proud of that group, and we'll remember them forever for that. So hopefully it stands for a while.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, is like, having been in the dugout across the way, playing Baltimore quite a bit in the East, you always seem to see them playing the game hard, trying to take extra bases, being really aggressive. They're young, they're fast, they're athletic. Do you think that's something that as an organization you guys kind of push? Is that all the way into like the draft process? Like, it just seems like everybody coming up in your system kind of has that same profile of like super athletic, super fast, plays the game hard. Is that something that you guys really push as an org?
I'd say it seems that way for sure. I think there's a kind of shift in baseball across the board, seems to be headed that way towards, athleticism and placing a premium on that. But, especially in the lower levels where I've been in high A, the guys are encouraged to be aggressive, and they can kind of, get away with it a little bit more so. So they definitely push themselves on the bases, and, paid attention to, little details and things like that, start stances, things, watching video, taking pride. I mean, like I said, game of inches, especially stolen bases. So, a couple here and there, and that record never happened. So I think, yeah, for sure they're an athletic bunch, but I think that's just kind of where the game's headed. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's probably the same, observation that I've had over my time. Is just, I don't know if it's the bigger bases, the clocks, just in general, guys wanting to take extra 90s, but it just seems like athleticism and speed are kind of making a little bit of a comeback, in addition to trying to maintain a lot of that power that people are pushing. So interesting time, but like I said, just from afar, being on the other side, it was always annoying but exciting to watch you guys play, just because I enjoy watching baseball being played that way. So it was annoying because you guys were always just taking extra bases against us, but it's cool that the game is going that way and you guys kind of value that. So what do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing?
I'd probably say with working in professional sports, I'd say people probably put more of an emphasis on the positive impact and how much impact you can make that way, where it's really easy to have a negative impact, honestly, especially in season, if you ask too much of guys. So I think that's one, just having that at the forefront, being conscious of, keeping the main thing, not trying to turn them all into weightlifters. They're baseball players first and foremost. And then to kind of piggyback off that, I'd probably say you probably don't need to be quite as strong as you might think. Honestly, like at least as much as I thought, before getting into it. You see some things, you're working with this population that kind of like breaks your strength coach brain for a second, seeing what they can do on the field and what they do kind of in the weight room. So those are a couple things that maybe come as a surprise to people, but kind of over the years have shown me.
Let me clarify on your first point. So you're saying that it's easy to accidentally hurt somebody or have a negative impact on them because how much they play, how much they practice compared to how much we train. Is that kind of the gist of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I would say that you could like training effects take time. So if you're looking to make hopeful transfer from the weight room, it's going to take weeks, but you could have a really grueling session in the weight room and kind of smoke a guy, and then his next couple of nights he's really feeling that. So just keeping that in mind, I'd say, not to minimize what we do. Definitely, I think we hopefully all make positive impacts and can, but just working with this population and playing 140 games a year, one day off a week, that's so much that they're asked to do. Just keeping that in mind when it comes time to work with them in the weight room. So
I'm curious on your thought here. So first and foremost, totally agree. When I talk to people and they're like, oh, do guys actually lift in season? It's like, yes, but it's probably not as much as you think, or it's probably not as, I don't know, sexy as you think, or as drastic as you think. But it feels like a lot of times people are looking for a quote unquote unlock. And then they're like, oh, I felt something today. And I have to stick to that, when really most of the time, I think it's just consistent effort over a period of time that really makes a difference in things. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I think I have been around some guys that are like searching for a feel or searching for an unlock, and they end up spending an hour extra in the cage or taking 100, 200, 500 extra swings, and almost like negatively impacting themselves for an extended period of time, when most of the guys that make changes kind of find one thing, they stick to it for a while, they see if it works, and then if it does, they stay with it. If not, they make a change. Is that kind of your experience as well, or am I off a little bit there?
No, I would agree 100% with that. There's limited, capacity for adaptation. You can only do so much and expect results. It's tough. There's a quote, like, you can't make a baby in 9 months. It takes time, the natural process of, picking up skill or skill development, especially when you're talking about the elite of the elite, they're searching for, that last percent. So sometimes, spending hours upon hours, in the weight room, maybe not be, best well spent time, if we're talking, skill development, because primarily, like, the skill is their moneymaker. Baseball is a skill sport, so that's got to be number one. The sequencing and the motor coordination of their skill, for sure.
That kind of leads me perfectly into your next point. So you're talking about not being as strong as you think you need to be. And I think there's an interesting shift going on where when I first got in, it was like nobody had lifted, right, back in the day. And then there was this shift to like, let's just lift bodybuilding. And then it became like as heavy and as much as possible. And that was kind of when I first got in, was like, we were starting to do heavy stuff. We were starting to get into some like VBT type stuff. And now it almost feels like we're shifting away from training into like all water bags, all 3D straps, all like specific field drills. And there's not like a general strength training. And I don't know, I don't think it's all the way over on that side of the continuum yet, but I kind of keep seeing it shift that way. And I'm curious, you have like, obviously you're at the lower levels, you have some of the younger guys, you have some guys coming from college. Are you seeing that shift as well? Or are those guys coming in pretty prepared with like a good base that you can kind of build on and do some of that skill development stuff?
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I think you got to be careful. I go back and forth all the time on that, like, not to get too far away from it. Yes, like you can't put too much emphasis and reach the point of like diminishing returns, but I don't think everybody's there yet at all. There's a lot of, you can look at somebody and tell they still got work to do. Maybe they were a high school guy or international sign, or maybe just the weight room wasn't a big part of their college development. But I think I kind of reframe the way I look at it is like, I don't have a number on the strength to get to, just you can't be weak. So, in order to kind of get a seat at the table and, do those things and, reach these exit velocities or throw this hard, you really can't be weak. So for some guys, they come in the org, they got skill, but they are a little weak. So we still gotta grind and, get them to a point where then maybe they can back off a little bit and try some of these other methods. But I think it starts with that first and foremost. And then, yeah, you see all this stuff on social media and water bags. You mentioned it. Great tools, but yeah, I think we start with getting strong and then we go from there.
Yeah, that's kind of how I've seen things as well. And in my new role, my new position, I'm doing much more off-season training versus in-season training. And it kind of just feels like some guys don't have a big base of strength. And they're like, well, how do I increase my bat speed? And it's like, well, it's not necessarily some of these drills. Sometimes it is, but sometimes you just have to get stronger and be consistent with your training. And I would agree. I don't think there's a specific number of like, 1.7 body weight or 2 times body weight on this exercise or that exercise is enough. But generally speaking, like if a guy can keep adding weight to an exercise and it keeps going relatively easy for him, he probably can keep getting stronger at that exercise. It's once you get to a certain point where, like you said earlier, there's only so much of a window for adaptation. There's only so much adaptive resource available. If you're spending extra time just trying to push certain lifts, then you're probably at a point where you're strong enough and now you need to start focusing on some other things. But if I can keep adding 25 pounds on my deadlift every couple of weeks, like, and it's easy and it just keeps going, like you can keep getting stronger. But once it's like, I'm at, I don't know, 500 pounds. And for me to get to 510, I got to add 10 pounds of mass and I got to train and I got to stop hitting, like, okay, then you probably don't need to keep pushing it. At least in my experience, that's kind of how I've seen it. But like I said, I don't know, I just keep seeing the shift to like young kids and like early high school kids and like, oh, we need to do this drill because he needs that separation. It's like, no, that kid's just weak. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm still an old head speaking sometimes like that, but that's just kind of how I feel. It's like, see a young kid, it's like, oh, he can't do this when he throws. It's like, well, yeah, because he's not strong enough to hold those positions. He doesn't need your special pitching drills or hitting drills. He just needs a little bit more strength. So maybe we're both crazy in believing that, but that's kind of how I see it as well. So if anybody's got comments after this and they want to come at us, maybe we'll get attacked for not wanting to use everything with a water bag, or I don't know. Water bags don't solve all problems in my mind.
That's kind of something I'm exploring recently and trying to add to my game, because I know they're out there, and guys will go places in the off season and come back with water bags that they were using and find helpful. So trying to dive into that too, and just add another tool to the toolbox I look at. But kind of follow up on that point you're making. I love this tweet. I want to read it. That's Next Level Baseball. I don't know if you've seen him on Twitter at all, or X. I think he was a scout at one point, but he put out this tweet basically talking about how the steroid era. So he says the steroid era in baseball proved one thing loud and clear: strength is a monstrous advantage when added to baseball skills. So he says players, steroids are no bueno, but adding strength through hard work, nutrition only requires effort and time spent. So I kind of think about that too. Like, yeah, they were, doing stuff that we would never recommend or do now, but they were definitely getting stronger and more physical. So that's something that I always kind of think about too. Like, yeah, let's not miss the boat early on. Some guys too at this population, they're so skilled at a young age, and they're on the map as a youth baseball player, going to these big schools, and some people can kind of be afraid to load them, and kind of skip over that stage. So I don't think you can afford to miss out on that if you want to reach your true potential. So for sure.
Yeah, and I think for me, like I said, being in more of an off-season strength training mode now, that's kind of where the big progress gets made, right? Like when I was in the big leagues, it was like, you have to come to spring training over prepared. You have to be ready. And I just don't know if a lot of guys are really pushing themselves in the off season to the level that they should. And I was actually having this conversation a couple hours ago with somebody who's like, if you have the course of 12 to 16 weeks and you map that out appropriately, by the time they leave and go to spring training or whatever sport you work with, right? Like if you have that off season and you progress it appropriately, they all should leave bigger, faster, stronger, and more prepared for the skill in the sport. And I think sometimes in my experience, guys will be given a goal, let's say add 10 to 15 pounds, right? First month, they don't really train. They don't add weight. Second month, they kind of train, but they don't really push themselves. They don't add a lot of weight. Next month, now you're into like weeks 8 to 12 in the off season. They kind of ramp up. And then by the time the end of month 3 hits, it's like, okay, they've put on 2 out of the 10 pounds. Well, now we got to put 8 pounds on this guy for him to reach his goal. And all of a sudden, he just starts taking in a ton of calories. He gets sloppy. He loses the skill aspect, right? Like putting the weight on and getting more physical takes time, and making sure that you do it over the course of time is the appropriate way to do it, so that, you're not having these huge fluctuations. And then guys show up and the front office is like, well, he's 10 pounds overweight. And it's like, well, no, he's at the goal weight you wanted, but he looks sloppy because he didn't really push himself early on. So I think the offseason is really underappreciated for how much progress you can make physically. And if you do that right, once you get to spring training in the season, that's where you kind of have the ability to start tinkering. But what I've seen is guys are putting all of their eggs in like the swing mechanic tinkering basket, and they're missing out on some of that physicality that I think would make things easier for them when they do go to tinker.
Yeah, it's tough in baseball where, when you see the guys, for the most part, it's go time. Like you show up in spring training and then you're right into games, and then it's the season. So like we do work in the off season through, remote training or camps and stuff like that. And you can have an impact there. But I think you're right on the money there. Like off season is where the magic's going to happen, and where you can make those big strides that some guys need. And, maybe some guys, they need to play winter ball, or they need to, work on their, hitting, facing live ABs or pitchability, things like that. They need more time spent in the game. And then for some others, it's, weight room should be the priority. So I think just coming up with a plan for each guy and where their time would be most wisely spent for the development is key.
Yeah, especially like you mentioned, the development aspect for minor leaguers. I know the games matter. I know winning is important, all of that, but part of development is just physicality and making them bigger and stronger and faster and more durable. And even if they don't show out in the early minor leagues, but they have some physical development that prepares them probably better long term. But again, part of the game nowadays is it's becoming younger, it's becoming faster. Guys are moving up the system a little bit quicker. So they get up to the big leagues and they just don't have this previous physical development. And then it's like, well, it's a little bit harder to develop you when we have to win every game. Like it's the AL East, for instance, right? We're both AL East people. Like it's a dogfight every night in the AL East. So back to your previous point earlier, it's like if I'm pushing development in the big leagues and I push a guy too far in the weight room and he can't help us, he can't contribute on the field in an AL East game, it's not a good look for me and it's not a good look for the player. And then all of a sudden questions are asked, right? And then the guy doesn't want to come to you because you smoked him. And now he takes 2 steps back physically. And by the time you get to July and August and September, he falls off the map. And it's like, what happened to this guy? Well, he didn't have any physicality. He didn't have any preparation. And then he kind of stopped coming. And then it's like, well, why can't you get him into the weight room? Like it's right. It's like that whole thing. And I'm sure anybody listening that's been in baseball probably has some sort of experience similar to that. So to your point, like it's paramount to make sure that guys go somewhere in the off season that you can trust, the coach, they're going to get pushed appropriately. They're going to lift, they're going to sprint, they're going to run, they're going to come in conditioned, over prepared. And I think a lot of people in the social media world that are pushing certain ideals and beliefs in baseball have never been in the in-season. And so they don't really know what it's like when you have those bus rides and you have those late nights into those early days and you hit the dog days of August. And so a lot of times they don't know what they don't know and they miss the boat. And I think that's kind of what's happening a little bit with the physical development side of the game. And again, not to completely like bash everybody, but I think there are some good things that are coming out too with, swing mechanics and pitch design and things like that. I think those are really awesome. There just has to be some sort of blend between the two. And I don't know where that's at in the game. It just feels like the pendulum is shifting the other way and eventually it'll kind of come back into the middle.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I mean, it's so competitive. You really can't afford to miss that boat. Like it goes quick for guys, their careers. So, off season have to capitalize on that. And especially nowadays with, analytics and numbers, like everything is tracked. So, sprint speed, exit velos and, cage rounds, everything is collected. So you really can't hide and you're going up against, somebody who's trying to take your job, make it to the top. So it's so competitive. Off season's huge. Right now we're reaching, a couple months out of spring training for the minor league side, and hopefully everybody, is on the right track, showing up and has a big year. So
this is that time of year where guys show up for a camp or you check in and why is this guy not at his goal weight? We need to kick it into overdrive. And then, like I said earlier, that's where things go a little astray, is just trying to overcompensate for a lack of work early in the off season. And then, or a guy comes into spring training is like, dude, I didn't do anything. And then you're really behind the 8 ball, which is always a fun battle and a fun conversation to have. But for sure, fingers crossed for you that it's a smooth spring training, but I think both of us know that something will come up.
Yeah.
It always does. Always does.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 1 of this 2-part interview with Chris. I hope you enjoyed this one. It was really interesting to discuss his internship and how it was so meaningful on his career thus far, and to hear about the crazy athleticism that they're developing over in the Baltimore Orioles organization. 3 things that I took from Chris in this episode: keep the main thing, and understand that they're athletes first. Training adaptations take time to be solidified, and come up with plans for players to figure out where their time would be best spent to help with their development. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.